I was 12 the day everything ended. I remember standing in the street barefoot, holding a torn school bag, staring at a sky that wasn't blue anymore. It glowed orange, black and red, burning my eyes. I watched the first nuclear bomb launched by our own government explode in the city center. Fire rose like a second sun, swallowing streets, buildings, and people. Shadows of the fallen burned into the pavement. I couldn't move. My legs refused. My mind screamed run, but my body froze. Then another missile came, another government, another nation. I watched it spiral from the sky directly toward where I was standing. The heat, the roar, the impending doom. I couldn't move. I was trapped in fear. Then, suddenly, a hand grabbed me from behind, yanking me to safety just as the bomb hit the ground. The shock wave lifted me off my feet. Debris, fire, and screams filled the air. The last thing I remember was someone shielding me with their body as the world turned into a storm of fire and ash. Earth did not die quietly. It died screaming, and humanity was partly to blame. The oceans, once vibrant, turned black with chemical runoff. Microplastics and radioactive waste poisoned the food chain. Fish floated belly up in coastal waters, birds fell mid-flight, and entire ecosystems collapsed under the weight of centuries of negligence. Heat waves scorched continents, melting asphalt, igniting forests, and creating firestorms that consumed cities in hours. Scientists warned governments repeatedly. Satellite data, ocean chemistry, and climate models all pointed to catastrophe, but warnings were ignored, buried under layers of political corruption. Leaders argued over resources, diverted funds into private projects, and downplayed disasters to protect power. While the wealthy hoarded survival plans, the poor struggled for clean air and water. Panic spread silently like a virus. Then came the nuclear meltdowns. Aging reactors failed one by one. Radioactive clouds drifted across borders. Nations panicked, old grudges and fear turned into full-scale nuclear retaliation. Cities were obliterated in minutes. Skyscrapers melted into rivers of steel. Rivers boiled into clouds of steam and ash. Alliances shattered. Former allies betrayed each other. Missiles crisscrossed the sky like flaming comets. Evacuation centers became battlefields. Soldiers fought civilians. Families were ripped apart. Elites bribed and murdered their way onto rockets, while ordinary people were crushed in the chaos. Children clutched tattered toys as parents were shoved aside. The Exodus program, long humanity's last hope, had become a war zone of greed, desperation, and survival. And yet, rockets still rose. I remember pressing my face to the viewport, watching silver streaks climb through the radioactive sky. Above, strange pulses flickered in the clouds, like the planet itself was alive, protesting, or warning us. The moral cost haunted everyone who fled. Humanity survived physically, but we carried the consequences of betrayal, corruption, and fear. I clutched a small metal toy my father gave me before he vanished. Mars waited, red, barren, silent, but there was no comfort. Only the realization that escaping Earth didn't mean escaping what we had done. And the nightmare was far from over. I woke to the hum of the shuttle's engines and a rattling of metal around me. My hands were still clenching the small metal toy my father had given me, the only thing left from the world that had burned to ash. The orange glow outside the viewport had faded, replaced by the black emptiness of space. But the void wasn't comforting. It was silent, cold, and endless. Around me, the other survivors moved like ghosts. Families huddled together, whispering prayers, rocking children too young to understand why the sky had burned or why their homes had vanished. Some stared blankly, faces pale and eyes hollow. Soldiers still carried weapons, scanning the shuttle as if paranoia could stop what we'd just escaped. I realized then, surviving Earth didn't make you safe. It just moved the nightmare farther away. The crew announced we were entering orbit around Mars. It was smaller than I imagined, barren and red, like a desert the size of a planet. No oceans, no clouds, nothing alive except the promise of a second chance. But I couldn't feel hope. Every time I looked down at the glowing cities behind us, now black twisted ruins, I felt guilt crawl through me like fire. Every scream, every mother, every child left behind. We carried it all. The shuttle screens flickered, showing strange readings from the planet's surface. Scientists murmured, pointing at anomalies, but no one seemed to fully understand. The readings were irregular, pulsing in ways that didn't match any natural pattern. Some whispered that the planet was reacting to us, or that Earth's destruction had sent a signal we couldn't yet interpret. I didn't know which scared me more, the thought of life beyond our world, or the possibility that we weren't alone in waiting. Rations were meager, and sleep even harder. People whispered about the Exodus program being flawed, about rockets running out of fuel, about hidden agendas in the governments that had orchestrated the evacuation. It felt like humanity had survived the bombs only to survive each other. I clutched my toy tighter, remembering my father's words, "Keep your eyes open, and never let them take your heart." But keeping your heart felt impossible here. That night, I heard screaming from one of the other shuttles docking nearby. Panic had erupted over supplies, and soldiers had fired warning shots. The noise traveled through the cabin walls, a reminder that chaos traveled faster than light. Even on the edge of a new world, humanity was still killing itself. I lay awake, staring at Mars through the viewport. Red, silent, empty. But not forgiving. I had survived, yes. But the nightmares weren't over. I had left Earth, but Earth had not left me. And somewhere, beneath the red dust, something was waiting. Mars was smaller, colder, and emptier than I imagined. The shuttle descended through the thin, dusty atmosphere, scraping clouds of red dust that smelled faintly metallic. Below, the barren plains stretched endlessly, dotted with jagged cliffs, deep craters, and skeletal remnants of past meteor impacts. There was no life, no wind, no birds, no water, only silence, broken occasionally by the hum of the shuttle's engines and the murmurs of terrified passengers. We landed at the first colony site, one of the hastily constructed outposts meant to house scientists, engineers, and the lucky few who had bribed their way onto the shuttles. The ground shook under our feet, though not from natural causes. The colony had been built too fast, with faulty supports and half-finished modules. Cracks spiderwebbed across the floors. The air was thin, sterile, and artificially pressurized. Even the oxygen masks didn't mask the cold dread that settled in my chest. The first night on Mars felt wrong. Not because it was dark, darkness I could handle, but because the silence was too perfect, too absolute, like the planet was holding its breath. Listening. By evening, the colony was already falling apart. The scientists argued about the anomalies beneath the soil, heartbeat-like pulses, heat signatures that appeared and vanished, and seismic readings coming from places that should have been dead rock. The soldiers argued about shortages and demanded tighter security. The civilians argued about everything else: oxygen, food, space, the future. It was supposed to be a fresh start. Instead, everyone acted like they'd brought Earth's madness with them. I sat on my bunk, polishing the small metal toy my father had given me, pretending it made me feel safe. It didn't. Nothing did. That night, something hit the outer dome. A faint thud. Then another. And another. At first, no one reacted. Mars stormed sometimes threw dust and debris at the colony's shell, but this sounded different. Too heavy. Too precise. Too deliberate. A soldier shouted for everyone to stay inside. I crept toward the viewport and pressed my forehead to the cold glass. Outside, beyond the glow of the lamps, the red desert stretched endlessly. Nothing moved. Nothing lit. But the shadows were wrong. They were shifting. Slowly. Crawling. Stretching across the sand like thin, elongated figures. They didn't walk, they glided, bending in ways no living body should. My chest stung with fear. I blinked, thinking it was dust distortion or my imagination. But then one of the shadows lifted something. An arm? A limb? And struck the dome again. The entire colony went still. Conversations died. Even the machines seemed to quiet themselves in that moment of collective dread. Then came the scream. A real human scream from outside. One of the engineers had gone out earlier to fix a failing oxygen pump. His radio crackled violently before cutting off. The soldiers scrambled to the entrance, demanding visual confirmation, but the external cameras glitched, static, corrupted images, flickering silhouettes that didn't make sense. Someone whispered, "Is it life?" Someone else whispered, "Or something worse?" I didn't know what terrified me more, the idea that Mars was alive. Or that it wasn't, and something else had been here long before us. That night, the colony didn't sleep. Some cried quietly. Others pretended to pray. Children clung to their parents, trembling. The soldiers stood guard, rifles shaking in their hands. The thuds eventually stopped. The shadows didn't. They stayed. Watching. Waiting. Their shapes shifting just beyond the light. And, deep beneath the ground, the heartbeat-like pulse grew stronger, slow, rhythmic vibrations that traveled up through the metal floors, through the bunks, through the air. I felt it in my spine. Mars wasn't dead. Mars wasn't empty. Mars wasn't waiting for us to build a home. It was waking up. And as I clutched my father's toy, trembling, I realized something far more terrifying than anything I had survived on Earth. We hadn't escaped destruction. We had landed on it. The night after the engineer's scream, no one slept. Not really. The colony lights flickered on and off as the generators struggled against the sudden power fluctuations. People whispered about creatures outside the dome, while others insisted it was hallucinations caused by stress and thin air. But I knew what I saw through the viewport. Those shifting shadows weren't illusions. They were real. Morning came with no warmth. The sun on Mars was small, distant, and cold. It didn't feel like sunlight at all, more like a reminder of how alone we were in a place that did not want us. Soldiers searched for the missing engineer, but they only found part of his suit. Shredded. Burned. Dragged across the sand. Nobody said it out loud, but everyone thought the same thing. Something took him. Something strong. Something fast. The colony's leaders held an emergency meeting. I wasn't supposed to be there, but the walls were thin, and fear made everyone speak louder. "We built the colony on unstable ground," one scientist snapped. "The seismic readings are increasing," another argued. "Something is moving under us. It's not tectonic," the lead geologist whispered. "Mars doesn't have active plates. Whatever is pulsing beneath the soil. It's not natural. We need weapons on every sector. We need to evacuate, now. There's nowhere to go." The shouting went in circles, fear feeding fear. Outside the meeting room, colonists huddled together, listening, pretending not to understand how desperate things were becoming. Later that day, the pulses beneath the colony intensified. I felt the floor vibrate under my feet, soft at first, then steady. Like a heartbeat. Like something huge and ancient exhaling beneath us. Dust drifted from the ceiling with every throb of the ground. People tried to act normal, but the tremors made cups shake, tables rattle, and nerves break. Even the soldiers gripped their rifles tighter, eyes darting toward the trembling floor. By evening, everyone was on edge. While the others rested, I sat alone near the viewport, clutching my metal toy. Mars looked calm from the inside, quiet, empty, harmless. But that was the lie. A thin layer of dust hid a truth far older and far colder than anything we brought from Earth. Then, without warning, the alarms blared. Warning. External impact warning. Pressure drop in Sector 3 warning. Unidentified movement near the outer wall. Colonists screamed and scrambled for masks. Soldiers sprinted toward the breach. I ran with them, because fear pushed my legs faster than logic ever could. When we reached Sector 3, the sight froze my blood. The outer wall hadn't cracked, it had caved inward, like something had punched through it. A long dark tunnel of torn metal led out into the red desert, the edges melted as if burned by intense heat. Tools were scattered across the floor. Blood smeared the walls. And at the far end of the tunnel, footprints. Not human. Too large. Too long. With too many joints. As we stared, the ground trembled again. Stronger. Closer. The scientist beside me whispered, trembling. It's not just life. It's a system. A network. A hive under the soil. She swallowed hard and added, voice cracking, and we just landed on top of it. The floor pulsed beneath us, once, twice, 3 times, like a warning, or a countdown. And deep beneath the colony, something answered.